4 years ago, I delved into my frequent YouTube hobby by making a follow-up video to my podcast project called Super Smash Crew, a series that takes place within my shared universe concept, Shareverse. Suffice to say, that video is not very good. A 1-hour session of cringe discussing Shareverse elements that either did not have an accompanying video or casting decisions that were revised and or completely thrown out for how stupid they were. But recently, I have been redoing my Smash Parody series rosters and breakdowns of each part. And now we have really come full circle, finally getting back to Super Smash Lesbians Ultimate, the parody series that lasted from 2019 to 2021. There is a lot to cover, so that's why I will not be starting with Season 1. Instead, Season 0. Yes, the production begins before it was even conceptualized. That's because there was a multitude of elements that caused Smash Lesbians to enter into a new era. There was no one catalyst that invoked its return. So that's what this video will discuss, the collection of events and incidents that led for Smash Lesbians to return. But we can't start in 2019, when the series began. Instead, let's start in 2017 and walk it from there. It's November 3rd, 2017. The events of Super Smash Lesbians, the series for Switch, ending on such a high note that almost all loose ends were tied. Starla was defeated outside of the building, the Midland nightmare of Blood of Sub-Zero 2 had ended, and the original Mario role of Super Smash Crew properly passed the hat to the current holder of that role. But most importantly, my reflection beating Nintendo to the punch on the feat that their latest and greatest console on the market now had its own Smash parody series before Nintendo made their own Smash Brothers. After how disastrous the recent productions were, it was almost a miracle that the final installment ended the way it did. So much so that AJ did not want to take a chance and bring the series back. Flash forward to March 2018. At the tail end of that month's Nintendo Direct, what initially started out as Splatoon footage made everyone watching the stream cream their pants, myself included.
It's Smash? Oh yeah, it's Smash!
But with this reveal, Nintendo kept a tight lip. All anyone could do was speculate on what would be new with Smash for Switch. I was in the boat believing that it would be a port of Smash 4 with some added content such as the Inklings being playable and Link having a Breath of the Wild outfit, almost identical to how Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had minor additions to its content compared to its vanilla release. Remember, Smash 4 had completed just 2 years prior. It would be way too soon for a brand new Smash game to hit the market in 2018. But I don't think anyone expected what Nintendo's E3 had in store 3 months later. Funny personal story, on the day of Nintendo's E3 presentation, I had to make a speech at my local Hilton for the graduating class of my alma mater elementary school. Barely anyone knew who I was or the history I had with the school. But as soon as I finished my speech, I was given access to bolt out of there and make it home in time to watch the Direct. Now the first half of the Direct wasn't anything crazy. They showed a couple of games, and that the hit Battle Royale called Fortnite was coming to the Switch, which will definitely become a fad come the end of the summer. But right around the halfway mark, Reggie switches focus to Sakurai, where he formally introduces Smash for Switch as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. As a cute way to show off the roster, each character was given a number that correlates to when they were introduced in Smash. So Mario was 1, 4 was Samus, 13 was Peach, 15 was Ice Climbers, 11 was Falcon. Wait a minute! Ice Climbers? The duo character that was removed from Smash 4 because of the 3DS's hardware limitations, despite Rosalina and Luma and Duck Hunt existing? And is that Pokemon Trainer? Is that Ocarina of Time Ganon? Is that Ike in his Path of Radiance design? And... no fucking way! Before the trailer finished, it was clear that this was no port of Smash 4. Sure, many assets and the UI was borrowed from Smash 4, but Super Smash Bros. Ultimate made it clear that this was a brand new game and that everyone was here. In the trailer, characters like Dark Pit and Lucina had a mark on their numbers. They were known as Echo Fighters, which is the nicer way of calling them clones of proper fighters. But with the introduction of clone characters having their own slots, take a guess who immediately got in. Yo! That's right, motherfuckers, Daisy's here! The very same character I requested in the Smash Fighter Ballad. And if this direct didn't sell everyone already, Sakurai had one more trick up his sleeve. Oh my fucking god! A character who was known for being too big for Smash is in Smash! At this point, all bets were off. Anyone with a reasonable video game background could get into Smash. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate was priming itself to be the best fighting game in history. The question was, who else is getting in? Despite the crazy reveals, My Reflection AJ still had no interest in Smash Lesbians returning. Sure, characters like Ivysaur, Squirtle, and even Daisy getting in didn't mean anything since the production and subsequent game adaptations already had those roles filled out. And for characters like Wolf and Rob, there was no major demand for these roles to be filled in the Parody series. Even with the leak and eventual confirmation of Castlevania's inclusion, Dark Samus and Crumb being Echo Fighters, and King K. Rool getting into Smash, these announcements still didn't budge AJ into making a new Smash Parody series production in the style of Ultimate. But with there being so much speculation of the final base roster, and so many requests of characters people wanted to get in, there was only one character that I was hoping would make the cut. I am of course talking about Rex from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And his chances were pretty high. He came from a first-party Nintendo title, Xenoblade 2 being one of the highest-selling games on the Switch in its first year, and his inclusion in Smash would generate more exposure to the series, similar to Shulk in Smash 4. There was no reason to doubt Rex could get in. Unfortunately, a lot of people thought otherwise. These days, Xenoblade 2 is looked back at with fond memories, and haters have grown to appreciate the game for what it is, even if Xenoblade 3 and its DLC does all of the heavy lifting to reach that conclusion. But you have to understand that in 2018, to an outsider, Xenoblade 2 was a joke. Most people didn't like the mindless anime fan service shown within the first few hours of the game. The game did a poor job explaining things, early game combat was significantly slower than in the first game, and people hated Rex for having an annoying voice while fighting alongside his two big-breasted girlfriends. So whenever I told people, both online and in person, that I was really hoping for Rex to get in, people looked at me funny. Most people didn't know who he was. But much like how Rex never gives up on his journey of reaching Elysium, that inspired me to not give up on the idea that he could get into Smash. There was some concerns, however, such as the infamous Grinch leak that did not feature Rex, but was ultimately debunked the second Incineroar was confirmed as the final character in the base roster. I was honestly fine with this decision, believing that Rex would definitely appear as DLC in the Fighter's Pass. Surely Nintendo has a spot for another Xenoblade rep in their fighting game.
Watch this, Lise. You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now.
Yeah, that happened. And to rub salt on a fresh amputation, Sakurai announced other important Xenoblade 2 characters as spirits, which was presumed as this game's equivalent to trophies from previous titles, and therefore instantly deconfirming them as DLC. Not enough salt? How about announcing the first DLC character was a goddamn piranha plant, immediately after breaking my heart? The optimistic, likable protagonist of a JRPG got outdone by a joke character nobody asked for. At the very least, I was able to drag Shantae fans with me into the realm known as DLC Purgatory following the direct. The difference is that I got out. Even with this shell shock, I still bought Smash Ultimate day one, and yet AJ still had no interest to bring back Smash Lesbians at all. Not even Persona 5's Joker, Ren Amiyama, being in Smash, could twist his arm enough to change his mind. But almost around the same time, Mortal Kombat 11 was revealing its roster, and the one character I was dead set on seeing in the game was Mileena. But make no mistake, I was not one of those obsessive fanboys constantly spamming in every combat cast when their favorite character is getting in. Now, obviously in Shareverse, Mileena couldn't really get in since she was still working at Coral Knights, and it would interfere with the game's adaptation of the Chronica Crisis that happened earlier that year. And within those 4 years, Mileena was a changed woman. There was no way NRS could squeeze her in. But with Mortal Kombat having more accurate leaks than Smash, and Mileena not appearing in the base roster, I was also hoping that she would be DLC. And that is when AJ got a splendid idea in Shareverse. Have these two Astral Souls meet, with there being a perfect opportunity in April 2019. When Joker got into Smash, Sub Coral Knights was hosting a celebration on the night of his release. And because the Megami Tensei franchise is in the Coral alignment, Sub Coral Knights owner Carmilla invited those from Coral Knights over. AJ decided to join for his master plan. Rex was already associated with Sub Coral Knights, contributing briefly in the second part of that storyline, so Carmilla invited him to the event. And she's best friends with Mileena, courtesy of the fighting game community. This would be AJ's first time meeting Rex in person, and he was already familiar with Mileena, so he had the two meet and discuss some things. Later in the night, Ren had a bizarre request. He was aware that Rex's chance of getting into Smash were shot down, and he felt bad for him, so he wanted to make it up to him by having a match then and there. Rex accepted, and the two dueled, with Rex using both of the Aegis swords alternatively, and Ren using his comps to summon demons/personas. But with the Aegis's foresight abilities and flames, Rex actually beat Ren. This had everyone, including Mileena, impressed that Rex was a lot stronger than most people made him out to be. This fight was full proof for the idea that Rex and Mileena could team up and challenge the DLC characters that were coming to their respective games, hoping that their victories would have their employers consider them to be DLC later down the line. Both agreed to the idea, and thus the DLC crew was formed. Moving on to June, the final proper E3 of all time, and with the rampant speculation of Smash Ultimate's DLC, there was a lot of hype building up to the direct. It started off with Dragon Quest XI's hero, alongside 3, 4, and 8's heroes, getting into Smash, finally having people whining for Goku and Smash to shut up. But there was one pair of characters so many people wanted to see in Smash, Banjo and Kazooie, and I had the mindset of that being impossible. Yes, Rare and Nintendo had a tight partnership in the 90s, but that was in the past. Microsoft owns Rare and has a strong rivalry with Nintendo. There's no way they would allow their characters to return on a Nintendo console. Without any announcement towards the end of the direct, Nintendo showed off yet another Smash DLC trailer, this time a variation of the King K. Rool trailer of Nintendo characters battling their rivals. At first, I assumed we would get another villain, like Porky or Hades. Who's it gonna be? Right at this exact frame, waiting on the checkout line at a restaurant depot, my heart dropped to my stomach. I never felt this much shame and shock than the Rex Mii costume. I hate being a broken record, but the fact that a first-party JRPG Nintendo protagonist in a game that's already filled with first-party JRPG Nintendo protagonists was relegated as a Mii costume no one will ever use, and yet the Microsoft character, who has been irrelevant for over 10 years, got in instead. My 19-year-old brain was full of salt, anger, and jealousy. I really thought that my character would never get in at this point. But, as usual, I kept moving forward. Let's just say, I listened to Drifting Souls multiple times during that summer. Over on Shareverse, Mortal Kombat 11's first DLC character was Shang Tsung, and since he created Mileena in the 90s, she had no issue fighting her second father. Okay, let's shift the focus back to me again. While I was still butthurt over Banjo, me and my friends were invited to a local Smash Ultimate tournament where the winner would get the prize money. I entered into the singles bracket, and not to toot my own horn, but I won the tournament. We actually have footage of me winning here. Unfortunately, I didn't win any of the money because someone, I'm not naming names, decided to use the winning prize money to order more dominoes. And then some of us began singing Come Sweet Death from End of Evangelion. I have no idea where that footage went, it's probably gone. But this was the first instance that crossed AJ's mind. Should he bring back Smash Lesbians? This idea would later re-emerge the following week, where he was on vacation off-country. And during that time, Nintendo decided to drop a showcase for Hero, only for it to end with the announcement that Hero would be released at that very moment. The rules for the DLC crew was that the moment a DLC character comes out, the DLC crew has to fight that person. So Rex had to fight someone from Dragon Quest immediately, but nobody had to wait that long, since at that exact same island on that exact same day, Goku was there. The rules tried to justify it by saying people wanted Goku in Smash, instead we got Hero, and also the fact that Toriyama did a lot of the artwork for Dragon Quest, so there was your justification as to Goku replacing any of the heroes. It turns out Goku was there because he arranged a meeting with the Disney alignment to terminate a specific contract. So you know the god-awful live-action Dragon Ball Evolution movie from 2009? Yeah, it turns out that movie was made by 20th Century Fox, which is now owned by Disney. And because nobody from Dragon Ball wants to have any lingering ties with Disney, they agreed to meet with Mickey to terminate their contract. Unfortunately, Goku doesn't know how to write, so Chi-Chi had to come in and sign all the papers. But the contract requires Goku to be present in the room if the contract were to be either modified or terminated. So while he was waiting for the meeting, Goku was killing time on the island for a couple of days. There was no better time for AJ to throw Rex at Goku, which is definitely not the brightest idea considering the massive contrast in power scaling. Naturally, the first two matches were a curb stomp, but it just so happens that by the time the two had a proper fight, it was Odaiba Day, August 1st, and the 20th anniversary of the Digimon Adventure anime adaptation. Honestly, as I am typing this script, I noticed that this 1 week should be its own video for Neo Disney Fighting Evolution because of how complex all of this was. So here's the spark notes of what's really necessary for Smash Lesbians Season 0. While Goku and Rex had their fight, it was interrupted because of Digimon antics battling their parents yet again. But this time around, they learned to get along with Shinji as they teamed up to take down Karu, who, throughout all this time as Adamon and fucking with the Digidestined, it was all a test for Shinji to recuperate with his creations once more. And for once, Shinji took that advice as he reconnected with his children for the first time in almost 30 years. No one died during this incident, and they all went out for dinner. And in the middle of it all, Rex was there, ending his match with Goku as an unofficial draw.
Who are you people?
1 week later, Mortal Kombat 11's second DLC character was released. This time, it was Nightwolf. But since Mileena fought him in the past during Coral Nights when he was a Revenant, she was used to his tricks. Once AJ got back to America, the idea of Smash Lesbians Ultimate crossed his mind again. The fact that the 3 anime series that served as the foundation for Super Smash Crew all sharing a meal was one thing, but that it started from a Smash-related conflict was also another. AJ began to consider more on the fact that if Smash Lesbians should return, even if Rex was all but confirmed that he was not in Smash Bros. Ultimate, nobody said that he could not appear in AJ's Smash production. And with Smash Ultimate bringing back old and new faces alike, some of which not getting a roles filled out in the Parody series, there was a demand within the 6 alignments of Shareverse for Smash Lesbians to return. And so, AJ made the full commitment to create Super Smash Lesbians Ultimate, but he couldn't do it alone. Out of all of the people he could have asked, he went to Starla and requested if she could be his co-host. Despite everything she did, her nefarious plans, hijacking the Parody series time and time again, at the end of the day, Starla was a really good entertainer. She had history hosting the F-Zero organization's seasonal events, and she could gravitate a lot of viewers to watch the series. Both hosts had the mindset of making this the definitive production of the Parody series, bringing back those from Super Smash Crew into a new era. And to celebrate the revival, the first new member of the production was Rex, the DLC crew member that could prove that he is good enough to be in a legitimate Smash game, as he would challenge a particular bear and bird duo on the night of their release. But that is a story that we will get into in Season 1. Look, I know at the end of the day, Rex technically did get into Smash Ultimate, and I should not hark on the times that he was still a Mii costume. But in 2019, despite all the evidence telling me otherwise, I still held on to hope. The idea of spirits deconfirming characters was way too vague. Characters that were already in Smash appeared in several spirits outside of their own. And going back to Smash 4, Mewtwo and Lucas were trophies in the base game, but that didn't stop them from being DLC. Hell, Mewtwo was announced as DLC before Smash 4 launched, and he was still given 2 trophies. And as we would see with Min Min, the speculation of spirits or trophies preventing a character's inclusion was a bunch of hogwash. The only exceptions were Mii costumes, such as Rex. But as we have seen time and time again, there are some workarounds to these deconfirmations. All I'm saying is that never give up on the dreams that your character could get into a fighting game, because more times than not, the impossible will become the possible. And Smash Ultimate is living proof of that. Unless your dream character is Goku, who is a manga character, or Sora, which would in turn make AJ lose the rights of Smash Lesbians to Mickey, but I'm getting ahead of myself. And so, that was Smash Lesbians Ultimate Season 0, the build-up to the revival of the Smash Parody series. Whenever I make the next video, it will be an updated roster of the first season. So if you liked the eventual decision to bring back the production, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe when the list of newcomers and rearrangements of Season 1 comes around. With that, I'm AJ, and I'll see you all in the next one.